Here in CONCACAF, we know our ABCs, but in CONCACAF, we're talking islands. We're going to talk about one of them today. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the World of CONCACAF podcast. I am Eric Schmitz,
I'm Jonathan Sleep.
And I'm Donald Wine.
and this one is going to be kind of a quick but fun one. We're here for another CONCACAF Laser Focus, and we're here to talk about one of CONCACAF's, stepbrothers, stepsister island countries. That's a country, but not really a country.
The Jackson Five's favorite islands.
Yeah, the ABCs.
ABCs.
Yeah. We're going to talk about Bonaire, which is fun because I feel like they're of all the smaller nations, quote unquote. I feel like of late they've got more of the fun recent stories, like in a positive way. So I'm really looking forward to diving in. Should we just jump into it, or how you guys feeling today?
Pretty good. I will tease shout out to our patrons, but I will tease the one more round that we are going to record after this is going to be one of the best ones we've ever done. I'm just putting that out there.
Yes.
So you should be a patron so that you can
What?
listen to good stuff as well as bonus content that is just as good, if not better.
Well, Donald, thank you for actually bringing this up before the end of the episode. Like we probably should every episode. Where can people find our Patreon?
Patreon.com/podcacaf. POD
Nice. Yes. Please subscribe. There's a free option, but we would appreciate you to support the podcast. A lot of bonus content, including one more round bonus episodes that we record as companions to all of these episodes. So we really appreciate the support. Shout out to all our patrons. We love you. Like heart hands.
Hard hands.
We're hard doing heart hands right now. Really appreciate everyone's support because it lets us do this podcast about weird kind of island, kind of nations like Bonaire. So let's just go ahead and get into it. I guess I get to lead off. A little bit of background on Bonaire. Bonaire is a small island in the Caribbean Sea. It's part of the Dutch Caribbean and is located just north of Venezuela. It is the B of the ABC Islands, situated between Aruba and Curacao. Bonaire was originally inhabited by the indigenous, I'm going to try this, Kaiketo people, Kaikesho people. I don't know. I'm American. I don't know pronunciations well. Bonaire was known for its farming and fishing communities. European interest in the island began in the early 16th century when Spanish explorers arrived. The name Bonaire itself, it's thought to be derived from the indigenous word Bonaire, meaning low country. But there's also another theory that the name might be derived from the Spanish phrase buen air, which means good air, which makes sense, probably beautiful air. The Spanish were the first Europeans to colonize the island, so that would kind of make sense. But either way, it's called Bonaire. The Spanish colonized the island first, but they turned their attention elsewhere, kind of leaving the island a little bit undeveloped and ignored during the early colonization of the Caribbean. In the mid 17th century, Bonaire came under Dutch control as part of the Dutch West India Company. Their efforts to expand through the Caribbean. The Dutch wanted the island for salt production, which was a key point of Bonaire's economy. Salt mining operations started relying heavily on the slave labor from Africa, much like many of the other islands in the area. The Netherlands lost control of Bonaire twice, once from 1800 to 1803, and again from 1807 to 1816. During this period of British rule, a large number of white traders settled on the island and built a settlement of Playa, which became the capital of Kralendijk, and that was back in 1810. The salt industry really dominated the economy for centuries, shaping much of the social and economic landscape. The late 19th and early 20th centuries, they really marked a shift as Bonaire began to develop a tourism industry. Uh, Beautiful beaches, clear waters, marine life, like the kind of things that tourists want to see. That became a bigger part of the economy. Um, you also saw some political changes in the mid 20th century, with Bonaire becoming part of the Netherlands Antilles in 1954, which provided the island with local governance and improvements in infrastructure. But the dissolution of the Netherlands Antilles in 2010, that kind of resulted in Bonaire becoming a special municipality of the Netherlands. This change kept Bonaire under direct Dutch administration while maintaining its Caribbean identity. And it does have a bit of a Caribbean identity, as many of these islands do. Um, Jonathan, do you want to talk a little bit about the culture of the country?
Yeah, so culturally, it like a lot of the Caribbean islands that we've talked about is kind of a mixture of cultures. There's African influences. There's of course the Dutch influence with them being a part of the Netherlands, and then also some of there's Afro-Caribbean kind of influences through there. It is different than a lot of the other islands in the fact of it doesn't get very rainy. They have a shit ton of cactuses. And like their biggest sports is scuba diving, windsurfing, and kite surfing. And so like really focused on like water sports. And then of course there's a little bit of baseball and soccer, of course. There's 86 dive spots on the island, the world's oldest marine reserve. So there is a ton of spots for diving, great, awesome coral reefs, and of course, wildlife. And then there's actually, a bay on the south side of the island that you will see people windsurfing and kite surfing. They, in 2014, hosted some windsurfing national competitions, which was a big deal. Other thing culturally, not really. It's maybe they have more flamingos than people on the island. It's one of the world's largest populations, which I thought was pretty fun. The big cultural events, they have one called Masquerada. That is, it's the New Year's Day celebration. It involves a lot of dances, a lot of food, and so people get dressed up, wear a mask, and perform, and at the end of the day remove their mask. And then the other big kind of cultural events within the year is Simadon, which takes place between February and May at a couple different points. It was based around the harvest of sorghum on the island. And then there's a lot of dancing. They do a dance called the Wappa, which is kind of like one of their famous dances within the area. And then the other big one they have falls during Simadon, but it's Dia de Rancan, which is the 30th of April every year. So that's kind of a bit on the culture.
Yeah, no, I mean, looking at it from what I've been reading about Bonaire, it's for the islands, like you kind of think of like a muggy, very tropical climate. This is more of a arid climate there. It's like just nice and dry. Like
Well,
you're
it's arid
talking
but
like
humid, right? It's still humid, but like the way that the winds kind of blow it creates this
yeah, the
dry,
trade
arid
winds.
climate. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's like 500, like basically like it's only a couple inches of rain a year.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
and
their
then
dry season is January to September, which is like a good chunk of the year.
yeah. Um, and then yeah, just like it being like so like it's a very desert climate, shit ton of cactuses, which is not what when reading about this, what I ever thought like, never think of a cactus in the Caribbean, but here we sit. There's actually there's very little rum production there, and that comes to the fact that it's like very like most of it's below sea level. They do a lot of salt production, so there's not really a lot of natural water. But there's one rum distillery on the island, and they also make liquor from cactuses as well.
That actually would be pretty good. I'd be
Yeah.
willing to try that.
Yeah. No, I mean, have you had cactus liquor before? I haven't.
I've had prickly pears, probably the closest thing
Yeah.
I've had to that.
Yeah. The other historical fact that I found kind of interesting was back in World War II, um, during because the Netherlands was so heavily involved in World War II, the American Army had also the American Army built an Air Force base in Bonaire, and because of the Dutch element, there were obviously Nazi sympathizers on the island. They actually had internment camps in Bonaire, which is kind of wild because it's obviously so far away from everything. But it was wild times. But aside from war, I think this podcast is about soccer. So we should probably talk about some soccer. Donald, let's talk about the football. Yeah, what's the history of soccer in Bonaire?
Yeah, so the football of Bonaire, or the football history of Bonaire, is pretty interesting because while the modern federation was founded in 1960, soccer in the island goes back to 1923. They had other efforts to kind of organize a federation before 1960, but for all intents and purposes, the real history of Bonaire starts just before that in 1956 when they had, some domestic matches kind of happen. The Bonaire League, the main league, which we'll talk about in a second, was formed in 1960. And of course, everything, as you mentioned, was part of the Netherlands Antilles. And they even had a competition called the Netherlands Antilles Championship, where the top two teams in the league every year played in this tournament until obviously it dissolved in 2010. And no Bonaire team won that cup, but again, they had a couple of teams every single year that were in that cup, kind of like their own mini Champions League, so to speak. There's no women's league. They've had efforts to try and start one back in 2017, but they have not done so yet. They have a futsal league that started in 2021, but their main league is the Division Honor Bonaire, which is also known as the Campeonato. That's the men's league. It's only one league. And the one thing about their league, and we'll talk about some of it a little bit later, they have, just a few teams. They kind of have a weird hybrid system where they have 10 teams and they kind of go and do a one single tournament, or not tournament, but a one round robin where they only play each other once. Then they kind of split up into groups and do a group stage that kind of weeds themselves into a playoff system. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. I encourage everybody to kind of read up about it because it's a little bit different from that of the rest of the Caribbean. They became an associate member of CONCACAF, Bonaire's federation did, in April 2013. But the way they did it was kind of weird because some of you out there have applied for a job. I do it often. Sometimes you send in something and they go, "Hey, we never got your application." Well, Eric, that kind of happened here, courtesy of one stupid ass named Jack Warner.
Yeah. So apparently it was a 2-year process just to get accepted as an associate member, because literally the paperwork went missing after being sent to Jack Warner. And what do we know about Jack Warner?
Jack Warner sucks.
Yes.
And this time he actually does suck because I can't confirm if they sent the thing in a manila envelope and he kind of got shaky, or if he tried to do something, but he literally had them on the benches for 2 years because he had the paperwork, or at least he lost it or misplaced it, or whatever he wants to call it. But Jack Warner really sucks for this.
Yeah. And also to note, the Federation was formed in 1960, and they were accepted as an associate member in 2013. And by 2014, they were a full member of CONCACAF. So it's once they decided to go for it, they definitely, it was a quick process.
Mm-hmm.
But Donald, do you want to talk a little bit about why they're not in FIFA?
Well, because they're part of the Netherlands. That's why they're not in FIFA. And FIFA has done away essentially, and we've talked about this when we talk about Greenland and other episodes. They've kind of done away with territories that aren't already in becoming full-fledged members of FIFA. So in essence, the ABC Islands would have to become independent for them to officially join.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's interesting that like Aruba and Curacao are full members, but Bonaire is the one that isn't. So they've all got
And
different
because they got
relationships
it, they
with the
didn't get in,
Netherlands.
I'm sorry, the other two got in
Yeah,
time,
in
essentially.
time. Back in March of 2018, the Federation president actually met with Gianni Infantino to try to begin the process of gaining membership, and it was honestly it was like supported by the Netherlands Federation. Like Bonaire would be invited to join like future FIFA things. Um, but in 2019, Bonaire's application for FIFA membership was denied, and they actually ended up appealing it to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and that appeal was unsuccessful, and the court ruled in favor of FIFA. So Bonaire is still on the outside looking in, but they're also trying to get into FIFA eventually. Obviously, it takes some government stuff being realigned for them to be eligible, but it seems like they are taking the steps.
Yeah, and before we get to the national teams, the senior national teams, I did want to mention one thing, and that's the stadium, the Stadion Antonio Trinidad. It's in Rincon, and it seats only 1,500 people. But the thing about it is, it's their first ever stadium. They opened it in March 2023, and we actually discussed it on this show. They hosted their first ever match on Bonairean soil in a Nations League match against Turks and Caicos on March 28th of 2023. So they've only been playing home games for about a year and a half now. But I think that is helping to spur a lot of the resources and development. And of course, what better game to open up a stadium than a Nations League game in League C? Like that's perfect. Like put it on a shirt and sell it. But I think the idea of having the stadium that they've put the resources into it, and from there they're able to host more games, and hopefully, and I think they've also set it up in a way where they could be viewed as a future site for a neutral site for some of these hub games that they're starting to do. They've kind of set themselves up where you don't need more than 1,500 seats if you're going to have a neutral hub for several teams to come play. This is hopefully what they're trying to do again to bring more money to the island.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna ruin the tea. So I'll just say, like this upcoming window here in CONCACAF Nations League, Bonaire is hosting.
There you go.
They have Montserrat, El Salvador, and our boys Vinci Heat all come into the island to play at their new stadium. And the interesting thing for me is that like they did the renovations to um, improve the field, to install the new artificial turf. Like FIFA had like financial assistance in the project. So like even though they're not a FIFA member, they've got Bonaire's had a relatively good relationship with FIFA. So there is some hope that eventually they'll, have a good case
Change that
to
rule. Yeah, and
yeah.
I think honestly, there's a lot of countries that are in a similar situation as Bonaire, but Bonaire has a leg up because they are part of they're part of CONCACAF and in good standing and being great neighbors, especially to the A and the C, so to speak. So and even they have kind of a developed a little bit of a friendly rivalry between those two countries, Aruba and Curacao as well. But I want to shift to the women's national team. And the great thing, ladies and gentlemen, this is the one Caribbean country where we have the full history of their women's team. The reason for that is because their women's team is 11 months old. They had a random team compete as a club in the Dutch Caribbean Women's Soccer Cups in 2015 and 2017. They even have had some youth teams get together to compete in qualification for the 2018 CONCACAF Women's U20 Championship and then the 2020 CONCACAF Women's U17 Championship. And they used those competitions and those teams as a springboard to kind of finally get everything together to finally form a senior women's national team. And on September 21st, 2023, the Bonaire women's national team competed in their first ever match against Turks and Caicos at home in the new stadium, drawing 0-0 as part of qualifying for the 2024 CONCACAF Gold Cup. They eventually got their first win in October of that year against Aruba, again, big rivalry, winning 3-1 at home. They beat the Turks and Caicos on the away trip, their first road win. They beat them 2-0 back in December, but did not qualify for the W Gold Cup. Now, the weird thing about that tournament, at least for Bonaire, is that those qualifying matches were part of what they call the Road to CONCACAF W Gold Cup. Essentially, it was the formation of the Women's Nations League, which we love. They had League A, League B, League C. But the problem is
they gotta fix that branding.
they got to fix the branding, and hopefully they kind of allow that to happen. But again, it was quirky because they basically streamlined the United States, Canada, and even was it Jamaica to kind of get through this, or at least get to the cusp of making it. But they were placed in League C, which ironically in this qualification tournament had no path to actually qualify for the W Gold Cup. But however, the hope is Bonaire can continue to grow from here and continue to develop their women's national team as they compete in more competitions.
Yeah, it's like the road to W Gold Cup eventually.
Right. There's a road. It just theirs was a cul-de-sac. So they can keep walking. They're just going to turn around and go back where they came from.
Yeah. On the men's side, we kind of touched on a lot of the key points. Joining CONCACAF as a full member in 2014. The Bonaire national team didn't really play their first official national until 2014. They had entered Gold Cup Caribbean Cup qualification back in that 2014 tournament. They ended up going 2 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw in that tournament, which is not bad at all. But Caribbean Cup's kind of gone away, so not much there. They haven't qualified for a Gold Cup yet. Obviously not eligible for a FIFA World Cup, but CONCACAF Nations League is built for nation states like Bonaire. They've been in every edition. They started in League C, and the first 2 editions, they actually put up some good records, winning 2 out of 4 games in the first one, winning 3 out of 6 in the second one. But in the last edition of Nations League, the men's national team finished 2 wins, 2 losses with an even goal difference, which just happened to be good enough for first place in Group A of League C. So they have been promoted to League B for this upcoming Nations League. So honestly, the highest level of competition that the Bonaire national team has ever played. They're heading into this tournament this fall with a lot of high hopes. They're hosting games, which is a huge asset. Their head coach, Relov Jenga, is a Bonaire native who'd played for the national team before and also for the Netherlands Antilles national team, the previous iteration of that. And they've got some good young players. Ayrton Cecilia actually scored 5 goals in the last edition of Nations League, one of the top scorers in all leagues during the tournament. So there's a lot of things to look forward to, and especially having these home games here. We talked about the stadium. It's mostly domestic players, but for that part of the region, Bonaire is ranked 32nd out of 41 countries in the CONCACAF rankings. So they have performed in this decade that they have existed in CONCACAF. It's a lot of exciting times for Bonaire. You know what else is exciting, boys? Is real team or fake team?
Yeah.
I think we're gonna take a quick break, and then Jonathan, you're up.
I feel like
fire
I try to make
under
this
a seat.
difficult for everybody, and I feel like you guys are coming for me as the only one as the person on this team with the highest score.
We're going to break.
I got the perfect score and I got 0. So don't worry about the 0.
we're back. It is the fan favorite, best part of the show. It is real team or fake team, where we've got 6 team names that sound like they might be ridiculous, but they might be real, they might be fake. It's hard to tell. It's CONCACAF. These are ridiculous team names. So Jonathan is our contestant today. We've got 6 teams that may or may not exist in Bonaire, and Don and I are going to feed them to him, and we'll see if he can guess whether they're real or fake.
Let's do it.
So I'm going to lead it off. Jonathan, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. The first team I've got is SV Atletico Flamingo.
I'm gonna go real.
SV Atletico Flamingo is a real team. One of the stronger teams on the island. SV is essentially the FC of the island.
It's a Dutch.
Because
It's a Dutch thing. And
thing.
Yeah, that's yeah. When you said that, I was like, "Ooh, is he just getting cute with it, throwing the SV?" And then we know they got a shit ton of flamingos.
Well, I mean, they nailed it here, but there are a lot of SVs. I'm pretty much a good chunk of the teams are SVs, so they ain't gonna be the first one you get.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so I am up. You're 1 for 1, and the next one we have is SV Juventus.
So this is the tough one because there was a Juventus for Nicaragua, and I believe this is not the first Juventus. Fuck it, let's go real.
SV Juventus is a real team. They have the second most titles in the league with 14. They last won in 2013, and they finished 10th out of 11th in the Campeonato last season.
All right. Next up, we've got SV Ricardo Rincon.
SV Ricardo Rincon. Like Rincon, like it's a plausible name. It's not. Let's show real. Fuck it.
Ricardo Rincon is a fake team. Ricardo Rincon is also a Major League Baseball player who was featured in the movie Moneyball. But Rincon is a city, and
Rincon is a city.
Dia Rincon. I know my like baseball players don't know shit. So
I kind of had a feeling.
You chose your audience well.
All right. It's 2 for 3. It's 2 for 3. No
All right.
perfect
So
games
the next one I have is Fort Orange Verdedingsmat.
Can you spell that last word?
Yes, I can. So it is VERDEDIGINGSMACHT, and that translates to Fort Orange Defense Force.
I'm gonna go fake team.
I spent all that time trying to fucking translate this. Yes, it is a fake team. The very fake team. I tried to trip you up with the defense force part because there, as you know, a lot of defense forces.
I think you would have fallen for police force.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I would have been a different translation. I don't know if I could have said it. So I did. I'm giving myself an A+ for actually saying that right.
The fact that you were able to spell like that was I was honestly using that as a tell.
What? I mean, all of these teams we can read.
We can read.
Yeah, but
yeah. I mean, we got to find these team names somewhere. All right. Next up, SV Uruguay.
Real.
This is really quick. Why is it a real team?
I had gut feeling.
SV Uruguay is a real team in Bonaire. Uruguay is not near Bonaire, but apparently they're a team.
I mean, it's closer to Bonaire than Juventus.
This is true.
But there's other Juventuses. We've established this.
Yeah, but like the Juventus.
I mean, I assume you're talking about the Juventus in Nicaragua. but
I'm talking about Turin. One of these places is closer to Turin than Uruguay.
okay.
That is true. All right. So what you are? What 4 for 5?
4 for 5.
Yeah.
4 for 5. All right. So the last one I have for you is Arriba, Peru. ASCD Arriba, Peru.
Real team.
ASCD Arriba, Peru is a real team. They finished dead last in the league last season. There is no relegation, so they will continue to be dead last until someone else replaces them. They have never won the Campeonato.
Also shout out to SV Young Boys that got the cutting room floor.
We were talking about the SVs. They're like literally half the teams, more than half the teams are SVs. There are multiple Atleticos. There is an Independiente, and then there's the Arriba Peru. So yeah, the SV, it is their FC, and they use it frequently.
All right, Jonathan, 5 for 6. Another solid outing on this episode of Real Team or Fake Team. I think that about wraps us up. Thank you for tuning in. Again, thank you to our patrons who support us on our Patreon, patreon.com/podcacaf, where you can listen to early release episodes. We'll try to give them to you guys before they go to the public. You also get the exclusive one more round bonus episodes that we'll be recording after we wrap these episodes. Jonathan, where can people find you on the socials?
At JSlape SSP.
Donald?
At Blazing DW.
And you can basically find me at Podcacaf, PODCACAF. Yeah. We appreciate all of the support. Thanks for listening to our past episodes. Make sure you like, rate, review, subscribe. We are not the #1 soccer podcast in Montserrat for no reason.
Shout out Montserrat.
Yeah,
the entirety, even the volcano.
Yeah, shout out to the Emerald Boys,
especially the volcano.
Listen, that volcano has caused a lot of trouble, but much love to the Emerald Boys and everyone on that island and the other islands that listen to us. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.